Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Roman Pulcher Show. I am very excited to be with you guys today on another lovely Sunday, early afternoon here in central Pennsylvania, December 1st. So, I'm so grateful to be here today and to continue to give you guys the news and keep you guys updated on what's going on in the world. And I have a very fun video for you guys today. So the first thing I'd like to say is let's meet our goals on this channel. We had some success with our last video, so thank you guys for watching. If you watched the last video and you did not subscribe, please subscribe to this video. And please like and comment down below. We're trying to build something here. So thank you so much for watching. Now let's get those subscriptions up. Also, some of our channel goals, we're almost there to meeting one of them. Our goals were to get 1,000 views on the channel, I believe to get 50 hours of view time, and to get to 100 subscribers. Those were our first goals. We're almost at 1,000 total views on the channel. If we get like 150 views on this video, I think we'll be there. So let's please target that goal. Let's meet our goal, and let's keep on striving for more goals on this channel. So thank you guys for everything you've been doing. I'm so happy with our success so far. Let's keep on working and continuing to grow and improve our channel. So with that being said, let's get into the meat and potatoes of the video of today. And today what we're going to be talking about is what is Joe Biden's legacy as president of the United States and how would I rate his presidency. So we're going to kind of go through some of the things that he has done during his presidency, some of the important things that maybe he's done as a leader or accomplished, some of the important bills and laws that he's passed, and then I'm going to kind of talk about them, how I think they impacted Americans, and how I would rate his presidency. So let's start off with the beginning of his presidency and what got him to be president. Well, in 2020, he ran in the COVID election, obviously, against Donald Trump, who has shown to be a political force in the United States. And he defeated Donald Trump 306 to 232 in the Electoral College, defeating him and winning the popular vote as well by a margin of 51.3 points to 46.9 points nationally. And the most important thing about this election and this win that Joe Biden had, which is a part of his political legacy, is that he had 81 million votes, which is the most votes ever received in a presidential election. So he's the most voted for candidate of all time. And also, he won Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada, a sweep of some of the key battleground states during this election. So he defeated Donald Trump, receiving the most votes ever and sweeping the battleground states. So he comes in 2020, and now this is where it gets tough. He wins the election, and he obviously has to go through all the stuff with January 6th and whatnot and getting confirmed. And then he has to take over a COVID economy. And let's kind of dive into the things that he did in domestically at home to try to bounce back from the pandemic. So he passed, during his presidency, part of his legacy is passing the American Rescue Plan, which was a $1.9 trillion law passed, essentially, that did a lot of different things. It sent $1,400 to poor families to help pay for basic needs. It extended the $300 a week unemployment for federal employees, which benefited over 9.7 million people who were out of work during the virus. It temporarily extended the child tax credit, and it also allotted for over $7 billion to be given out for small business loans and $128 billion for grants and for state educational agencies, I should say. So it also helped to administer and track the COVID-19 vaccines to get them out to as many people as possible during the pandemic. So this is something that is positive that Joe Biden passed. He helped get as many Americans vaccinated. Him and Donald Trump really, in a way, worked on this together because Donald Trump did bring Project Warp Speed, bringing the vaccine to as many people as fast as possible. And now Joe Biden's American Rescue Plan helped to get the vaccine out and get it to as many people after becoming president. So something positive that he did there. Another thing that he did that is very positive, I'm going to read some of the stats about another one of these bills, and this one may be one of the most, I don't know what word to use to describe, most prestigious or one of my favorite laws that he passed as president, I would say, and that would be the bipartisan infrastructure law, which was a $1 trillion infrastructure bill to help with roads, bridges, railways, and high-speed internet and clean water, a very important variety of things that are going to be going into effect over the long term. And part of what that did was it spent $284 billion on repairing roads and bridges and railways and providing as many Americans as possible high-speed internet. So a positive thing that Joe Biden did there. So that was $284 billion for that. $65 billion went to high-speed internet specifically and trying to get high-speed internet to as many Americans as possible during a time where obviously internet is something that all Americans truly need. $73 billion were spent on power infrastructure, and $55 billion were spent on providing as many Americans that didn't have access to clean drinking water to access to clean drinking water as possible. And we should point out with this bill and this law that it was done because 32 Republicans in the House passed it and 19 in the Senate passed it. That is why it is the bipartisan infrastructure law. It gets through because Joe Biden reached across the aisle and worked for all Americans, which he said in his inaugural address he would do, and he got an infrastructure law passed. So another thing that Joe Biden did was he got one of the biggest gun safety bills passed in over 30 years. It provides incentives for states to pass red flag laws, allows groups to petition courts to remove weapons from those who they deem to be a risk, expands background checks, and expands the domestic abuse policy, which was if you were convicted of domestic abuse on a spouse, you could no longer purchase a weapon. Well, now he extended it through this law to also be for those who are convicted of domestic abuse as a boyfriend or girlfriend, not just as a spouse. So that's another positive thing that Joe Biden did during his presidency. So we're going to go through a couple other important laws that Joe Biden did pass during his presidency, and then I'm going to kind of talk about what I expected about his presidency and kind of how I would rate it. So another big thing that Joe Biden passed, another one of the most important things that he did during his presidency, was the CHIPS and Science Act. The CHIPS and Science Act, a $53 billion investment on making sure that we are manufacturing as many of our chips at home as possible, because as much as we were one of the leading producers, but we were importing more than double what we were producing from China, and we don't need to rely on China so much for these chips anymore due to the CHIPS and Science Act, which helped the United States to manufacture as many semiconductor chips at home, which these chips are used for phones, computers, iPads, even washing machines. They're used for pretty much everything. So these chips that now we are producing at home, we don't have to worry about importing them from China, a country that may eventually become an enemy or already kind of an enemy, but more of a future wartime threat or anything like that. We would not need to rely on them. And also we did this through the CHIPS and Science Act, not putting an insane tariff like Donald Trump would want to do that would increase the prices of domestic goods. You do it through an act like this. So this is a very good act which is going to provide more manufacturing at home for the United States with our chips over the next several years. Another, probably the most memorable thing that Joe Biden passed during his presidency, the Inflation Reduction Act, a significantly less version of Build Back Better, which would have been absolutely extraordinarily progressive policy, couldn't get it through at all. Instead, the Inflation Reduction Act, which is another very expensive law, but the Inflation Reduction Act, I believe, yes, actually decreases the deficit by increasing funding into the IRS, for instance, which through the Inflation Reduction Act gains $80 billion to help weed out tax cheats and create new technology to crack down on people who are cheating their tax codes and whatnot. $369 billion of this goes for for Joe Biden's climate initiative and to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and to promote the use of green technology. This was the most sweeping climate legislation passed probably in American history, $369 billion going to the climate initiative, uh, allowing for more production of electric vehicles, green vehicles. All this stuff is truly magnificent. $300 billion in new revenue through a corporate tax increase. So that's what's going to help lower the deficit and therefore the name of the act, the Inflation Reduction Act, hopefully lower inflation, increase the corporate tax rate, which will then lower the deficit. And a $2,000 annual cap for out-of-pocket prescription drug costs for those on Medicare, which is also another thing that Joe Biden did that I think is pretty productive. He did not on everything cap the price of insulin. He lowered the prices of prescription drugs for certain drugs and fought against big pharma in his picked and chosen ways, we should say. And also with the Inflation Reduction Act, you're seeing obviously significantly more people now investing in electric vehicles and new renewable technology, solar panels, wind energy, geothermal energy. So it is the most sweeping climate legislation that's been passed. And another thing I wanted to mention, I think I forgot to mention this whenever I was talking about the bipartisan infrastructure law, is that also promoted climate activism, as the bipartisan infrastructure law also spent countless dollars on public transportation and promoting the use of electric and green carbon reduced vehicles for public transportation and the creation of those. So Joe Biden really did do more for climate activism than any president in the history of the United States, arguably, besides maybe like a Teddy Roosevelt, who obviously did all the national parks. So Joe Biden did do a lot for climate during his presidency. That's part of his legacy. His foreign policy legacy is obviously that he supported Israel throughout his entire presidency. He gave them pretty much endless funds to commit the absolute sweeping humanitarian disaster that is in Gaza currently. Obviously, I'm not in favor of that. That's what his legacy is, that he always supported them and allowed them to do the massacres that they have committed in the Middle East. So that's part of his legacy. That's obviously a pretty major minus on his legacy, in my opinion. He also provided Ukraine with over $64 billion in assistance over his presidency and is trying to get another $725 million weapons deal done. Ukraine actually recently fired U.S. ATACMS into Russia. That was the first United States weapons that were fired onto Russian soil. So Joe Biden has defended Ukraine, a sovereign democratic nation who was invaded by Vladimir Putin, an absolutely crazy, wild, unpredictable dictator. And Joe Biden has stood up against that and through the funding of Ukraine throughout his presidency. So some other things that Joe Biden did during his presidency: 16 million new jobs that were created, 850,000 new manufacturing jobs were created. Those manufacturing jobs are of results of the bipartisan infrastructure law, which we talked about, and through the CHIPS and Science Act, bring back manufacturing at home, building more roads, fixing American high-speed internet, etc. He also passed the PACT Act, which expanded VA healthcare for veterans exposed to toxic burn pits and Agent Orange and other harmful chemicals. It made the access to the care simpler, less complicated, made it available for a wider range of veterans. So, a very positive law that he passed there. He also passed the PRO Act, which aimed to strengthen workers' rights to form unions and bargain for better pay and work conditions. And we actually have seen wages increase since this act has been passed. So, obviously, whether or not that is as a result of the PRO Act, you don't really know. It would take a lot more research and data accumulation, but it is a fact that wages have increased after the PRO Act was passed. So Joe Biden has done a lot during his presidency. I said, obviously, if I'm going to summarize his presidency a little bit real quick, I would say that he didn't get through all the things that he promised. He didn't legalize marijuana. He wasn't able to um, legalize or reschedule marijuana, I should say. He didn't do quite as much for student loan debt forgiveness as he said he would. Obviously, he tried Build Back Better. He tried to get through paid family leave and some other things, and he was unsuccessful in some of those attempts. But some of the positive things that he did do was obviously the acts that I said today, the PRO Act, the PACT Act, the Chips and Science Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, the gun reform law, the bipartisan infrastructure law, the American Rescue Plan. These are some of the positive things that Joe Biden has done over the last 4 years. I would say we have a steady economy now that is leading the world coming off of a huge recovery from obviously an insane worldwide pandemic. He has done more for climate activism than any other president in recent history. But at the end of the day, he also he didn't accomplish everything that he set out to do, and he didn't get done as much as he said he would do. So not all of his promises were kept. He also supported Israel, as Israel has committed some pretty atrocious tragedies over in the Middle East. And obviously, as we're summarizing, he did also help Ukraine throughout their conflict with Russia. So I didn't really think that Joe Biden would get as much positive climate legislation passed through the Inflation Reduction Act. I wouldn't have thought that he would bring 850,000 manufacturing jobs, 16 million new jobs created. I wouldn't have thought that he would have the lowest unemployment rate in 50 years at 4.1%. So these are positives that he did. The negatives, obviously, being how he managed Israel, not doing anything major for marijuana, not being able to get through some of the other things that he were targeted and promised through the Build Back Better program that was never passed. So overall, it's hard to judge. He also had to drop out of an election due to his age and his mental decline. He was not able to be forcing and I would say uniting leader because of that, because he was so divisive. Just on his age alone was a divisive thing for many Americans. So whenever we look at everything he did, domestic policy, foreign policy, national security, him as a leader. I know I've kind of rushed through a lot of this, but there's a lot to talk about, and I didn't want to make this video 45 minutes long. I would say he's a B plus president, and I think that I think that he deserves more respect for his domestic policy than what he gets. He did a lot of good things, and again, especially for me with the climate change agenda, he did a lot for climate change, and especially as well with the bipartisan infrastructure law. That was a great bill that was passed that is going to provide Americans with better roads, railways, high-speed internet, clean drinking water, and this Chips and Science Act, bringing back all those manufacturing jobs, producing things at home without raising the price of domestic goods through insane tariffs. So he did some good things. But I just can't get over the fact of his dealings with foreign policy with Israel. That's a major minus for me. And also the fact that he was so old, he wasn't really able to unite the country because of that age being a divisive characteristic of his presidency. So, Joe Biden, you're a B plus president. That's about my grade for you and your legacy. You're going to go down as a B plus president, an above average president, a pretty solid president who did good things for climate change and for American domestic manufacturing and job creation and roads and internet, etc. So thank you guys so much for sticking around to hear what I thought of Joe Biden's presidency and the different things that he did. I'm so grateful that you decided to tune in. Please like and subscribe. It helps so much. And also continue to comment down below, continue to help us meet our channel goals, and continue to make a difference in your communities. God bless and have an amazing rest of your Sunday.